place like that. You're under total intimidation all the time, even though he got to play with anti-gravity devices and everything else. After a while it was no fun. Very, very interesting story. I actually went back there to try and find him, and I couldn't locate him anymore. He'd gone off somewhere else. But he quit. He's one of these guys who quit, because a lot of these Black Ops guys quit. They really suffer. Here's another story I never told anybody. See, these things come to you. If you're doing a job, this information comes at you, and sometimes it comes really early and you don't know what to do with it. I was 18 years old, hitchhiking in northern Canada. It's in northern British Columbia. It's my first university vacation. I was hitchhiking, and I had a 200-mile ride with I was 18 years old. I had a 200-mile ride with a scientist who talked to me as an anonymous hitchhiker. I never knew his name, he never knew my name. He talked to me, poured his heart out for 200 miles because he was doing research about implanting chips in people's brains. This was in 1971. Sorry, 1972. 1972. Working for the Canadian military. He was a troubled man. He didn't know what to do. I can't remember much of it. I was a kid. I didn't know what was going on. I thought, wow, this guy's telling me about all this stuff. Is he crazy or what? And I listened very hard, and all I could remember after 200 miles was that he was telling me about the experiments he was being made to do to put chips into people's brains to control their behavior. Many years later, it's like, oh, okay, now I remember. Okay, now this fits with this, and this fits with this, this fits with this. But these guys are troubled, you see. They're really, really troubled. What Peterson said to us, Pete Peterson, bless him, he's a good man. They're all good men who we've spoken to. And this is all the context of your question here. Mm-hmm. Peterson said that he was talking to us because he didn't like the feeling of, this is an exact quote, he didn't like the feeling of having to take 3 baths a day to avoid the feeling of being covered in excrement. When someone gets a little further on in their lives, Peterson's over 70 now, he's a lovely man, and he's done stuff, they've all done stuff that they have to live with, Jake Simpson, I'm sure this is okay to say this, he's a wonderful man too, he's a very good friend of ours. They do all this psychological profiling and they pass tests and they get to go on certain missions and so on and so forth. He said that there was a particular test that he failed, which then confined his military intelligence history at one point, and the test that he failed. And it was a psychological profiling test, it wasn't an actual test, it was but they determined that he would be unable to kill a child.
Oh my goodness.
And therefore, there were certain missions that he didn't go on. There's certain things that he wasn't. You see, I'm only telling that little anecdote. Bless him, because he couldn't kill a child. But it means that in this whole world that we're inhabiting, of espionage, military counter, in this whole thing, these people who often, they're good people and they go into these programs, they don't know. They're not told everything at the beginning. They don't know what they're being called upon to do. Henry Deacon, Arthur Neumann, told us. You see, there's stuff there that he hasn't told. There's stuff there that he can't talk about. He can't talk about because he can't bring himself to talk about it. And we don't know what it is because he's never told us. He said that in his... there are Mars veterans, just like there are Vietnam veterans. Not because there's a fight, but just because people, they do a tour of duty on Mars. They spend some time working on a project and they go to Mars and come back and go to Mars and come back and all of this kind of stuff. And then they get moved on to another project maybe. It's my term, using a Mars veteran. He said that later on, after he did all this stuff with Mars, he was working with a guy in a small classified project within NOAA. NOAA is NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospherics Administration, like NASA, but it's NOAA. It's a public body, but they have classified projects too. That's when he told us that he knew about the second sun that was coming in. He encountered that in NOAA. They're just tracking it. I don't know if it's a big problem or not, but it's out there somewhere, he said. He didn't really know much about it. He said they talked about it sometimes. And there was this other guy who worked there who by coincidence happened to be a Mars veteran. He'd also done his stuff on Mars. And he said, Arthur said, these two men would go into their office, they would lock the door, and they would weep together. But he never told us why. He couldn't say. I don't know why. Kerry and I have been guessing for 2 years. We have no idea. But, and it might not matter. And, and we never pressed Henry on that. There are places which you ask him questions and they bounce off. He changes the subject or doesn't want to respond. But anyone who's been in these programs, they have suffered. They're suffering people. Another story that Henry told us, he was involved in the 9/11 operation that morning. We publicised that, but it's just an interesting story to tell. Because as an electronics specialist, one of the jobs that he had was to set up the control system which resulted in those two planes being flown into the twin into the Twin Towers, controlled like model aircraft from thousands of miles away. He set up the electronics for that, told us all about it. But as most people do in these projects, he didn't know what he was working on. He was just working on a control system. He didn't know what it was going to be used for. They didn't tell him. Why should they need to know? But on the morning before all of that happened, on the 11th of September, he and the people in his place of work were given a briefing. And the essence of the briefing was, on television today, you will see a whole bunch of stuff that's going to be very dramatic, but don't worry about it because it's just one of our projects. And he said, one of the things that shocked him, and it's a little bit like that other story he told about this briefing that he went into, he said the thing that amazed him was that everyone else said, okay, and just went back to work. And he was thinking, oh my God, what I've been working on is going to result in the deaths of thousands of people and the destruction of these two buildings and God knows what. And then he had a few hours in which he realized that he had the capability to sabotage it. Because he was working with the control system, he could easily put something in the software that would make those planes miss. And he didn't do it. And he lives with that. He lives with the fact that he could have averted 9/11. He could have had those planes drive into the Hudson, and they didn't do it. So, and he has to live with that. And you and I and everyone else watching this, they cannot imagine what it's like being somebody who is carrying that in their soul. Oh, no. And that's why they talk, you see. That's why they talk. They talk because they are trying to purge their souls. They're trying to atone for what they feel they have done. And on the inside, there's no escape. This is why we're protected. This is why you may be protected as well. Or may come to be protected as you come and do more and more work. Because some of these guys, there's nothing they can say on the inside